This episode of The Answer is Yes Baja Sessions is brought to you by Baja Bound Insurance Services. Driving to Mexico? You can buy and print out your Mexican auto insurance policy online in minutes with their easy-to-use website. They also have great travel information to help you plan your trip south of the border. Visit bajabound.com, the easiest way to get Mexican auto insurance.
Hello and welcome to Baja Sessions. This is a segment of the Answer is Yes podcast. We try to get this show out on Mondays or Tuesdays of every week, and we talk about things in Baja, and we introduce new people that are thinking about going to Baja, and our whole idea is to promote tourism and Baja itself. And as you would expect, I've got a lot of Baja friends that do some off-road racing and traveling down there. And I think I have, and you'll probably agree with me when I'm done with this, one of the craziest Baja legends / event owners on the planet. And today I've got Mike Pearlman on the phone. Mike, I finally wrangled you down and got you when you were ready. How are you today, Mike?
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for that great introduction. I like the word crazy a little bit. It kind of scares me.
Well, you know, you put on an incredible event, and that is the NORRA Mexican 1000. And I say it's incredible because I've done it for a lot of years now, and I just can't believe that that thing is revived from its past, and you're doing such a great job with it. And I think only a crazy person would be able to pull that off. So you fit the bill, my friend, and that I say that with the utmost compliment.
Well, I thank you very much, but I think this has always been on my mind, and it still is. It brings a little tears to my eyes when I think about it. But when we thought about doing this event over again, bringing it back, it really wasn't from our pockets. We weren't thinking about how much can we make, let's turn this into a business. We were thinking of finishing something that our dad started, and it was from our hearts a little bit, okay?
Yeah.
So it just started off on a different foot than most businesses. But I got to tell you, it's turned into kind of a business, but we still try and keep the love in it and the fun, and you know, I try not to focus on the business part of it, but it's there. But we're still following our hearts and bringing the fun into the sport as much as we can. That's our main focus.
Yeah, and so for my listeners that aren't familiar with what we're talking about, and I had a gentleman by the name of Sal Fish on our show maybe a month or more ago, and Sal talked about the SCORE International Baja 1000, and that is the race that came after the original NORRA Mexican 1000. So Mike's father, your father started this race basically, or was the founder of the series, and it lasted for a few years, and then it went away, and then SCORE came about, and then you brought it back, right? That's what we're talking about?
That's true. When Dad brought it in, it was called the Mexican 1000. He started NORRA. That was back in 1967. And I'm going to say he ran it for 7 years. He had a little political difficulty in Mexico. SCORE came in and took over the event, and they ran it for many years. I brought back the vintage racing about 10 years ago, and we're having a lot of fun with it. We've run it for 10 years now, and I think we're going to keep going. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. Our race isn't till April of this year, end of April, and we're already up to 175 entries.
Wow.
Signed up already for the event.
Wow.
So we're going to have a great year this year.
Mike, I know a lot of my friends and people in off-road know you for what you are today, and that's, you know, this man that's brought back a race that we all love and enjoy. But we don't know a lot about your dad and what his inspiration was to, you know, start the NORRA Mexican 1000 and what he was like. Can you tell us a little bit about your dad? Because I think a lot of us would appreciate knowing a little bit about your dad.
I'll tell you, Dad was a very simple person. He owned a flower shop. He actually owned 3 flower shops. He owned 3 major flower shops in the San Fernando Valley.
Mm-hmm.
He was a florist. And he had a passion about hunting. And so one year he said, well, we're going to go hunting, Mike. And I was about, I'm going to say 14, 15 years old, 14. And we saw a Land Cruiser for sale on Ventura Boulevard.
Uh-huh.
It was owned by the Edgar Rice Burroughs estate. And we bought that Land Cruiser. That was Tarzan. They evidently gave one of these Toyota Land Cruisers to Tarzan. And we bought that vehicle and had a lot of fun with it. Went off-roading. No, excuse me, off-roading was not a word back then. We went jeeping. We went trailing. We went fire roading.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, one day, he lent it to a friend of mine, and he blew up the motor. Well, Dad fit a V8 into it. And now it was a fast little hot rod. And he drag raced, and he hill climbed, and it became a different kind of a sport than just jeeping.
Uh-huh.
Okay?
Yep.
One day, he read a little article about how Eddie Mulder, Cliff Coleman, and the Eakins brothers set a record from Tijuana to La Paz on Triumph motorcycles. They were trying to beat a Honda record. And so he said, I could beat that record. And he got his Land Cruiser. He tried to find some wide tires for it. And back then, you couldn't find wide tires. So he found a guy selling farm implement tires out of his garage. Okay, well, the guy gave him 6 tires and said he wanted to be co-driver. So Dad and the co-driver went down to Baja, and they tried to break this record. Well, they didn't, but they had a great time. They had a great time. Imagine going to Baja back in 1967.
Yeah.
It was different. It was like the Wild West back then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So they both got back. Dad decided if he could only find about 60 guys to put up $100 each, they could have a great party in La Paz if they made a little event. So he put a little event on. The co-driver, his name was Dick Cepek. He started selling off-road equipment. They both did what they had to do in life, and Dick Cepek was famous, and so Ed Pearlman started a famous event, and that's how the Mexican 1000 got started.
Very interesting. And so their first race, if you will, do you know approximately how many people entered and went down for that?
There were 68 entries.
Wow. Okay.
It started in Tijuana. He actually had a hotel that he was going to start at, and then realized that the parking lot of the hotel wasn't big enough. So he got up in an airplane looking for a bigger spot to start in Tijuana. And he went, there's a bull ring. And there they go. They said, everybody go to the bull ring. The gates were unlocked. They just went there.
Mm-hmm.
The owner of the bull ring came by. He goes, what are you guys doing here? He said, well, we're starting a race. And somehow they talked him into letting him stay there, and it started in Tijuana at the bull ring.
Wow.
Went to Ensenada and had a restart, and then took off from Ensenada and went all the way to La Paz.
Huh. That's pretty fascinating. See, as many years I've been racing, I never heard that story.
No, that's a true story. I was there, and that's how it happened.
So, Mike, approximately how old were you when all that was going down, and were you said you were down there, so you were actually involved in what was happening?
I was 19 years old, and I was into photography a little bit, so Dad made me the official photographer.
Uh-huh.
And there you go. I took some pictures and had fun. So I was a kid. I was 19 years old. Yeah.
You're a kid in Mexico for a race, having a great time, right?
Well, yes. Come on, it was Mexico. I was 19. A lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. Tell us a little bit more about your dad outside being a florist and obviously a pioneer for racing in Mexico. How was he as a father, and was he somebody that you looked up to, or was this just a wacky dad that had crazy ideas? I mean, what was your life like with your dad?
I looked up to Dad. He was an entrepreneur kind of a guy. You know, he loved to hunt and fish, and he took me hunting and fishing a little bit when, you know, he went with his friends too. And we had a normal childhood until we put a V8 in this dang Land Cruiser, and then it became a little hot rod, and we got into the drag racing and hill climbing, and it kind of took over our life.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, as a 19-year-old kid, you know, he handed me the old Land Cruiser that he had, and he bought a new one, and I drove that Land Cruiser to school, to high school, and I was, I guess, a little different because out of a class of 700 kids, everybody had a car, and there were only 3 dirt cars, Jeep trail cars, Jeeps in the school, and I was one of them. So we were proud when we came to school with a muddy car.
I bet.
It was dusted out and covered in mud. It was like, that was cool. And I think we were the only kids that thought that was cool, but everybody else had nice, clean hot rods and 57 Chevys and so on. And then Dad decided to have this Land Cruiser with a V8, and it completely changed our life, 100%.
Yeah, well, it changed a lot of people's lives, because if you look at where off-road is today, and it was pioneers like your dad that started what we're all doing, I mean, he would be blown away. What happened?
Okay, hold on. I'm going to stop you there for a minute, Jim. There's another kind of a decent little story here that how the word off-road was invented.
Oh, okay.
And it's I don't know if you heard this, but back in 1967, Dad decided to put on an event. And so he got himself a little office, and he said, well, this is where we'll do the event out of, this little office here. And he goes, I guess the first thing I need is a rule book. Okay. So he called up the National Road Racing Association.
Uh-huh.
They did sports cars, road racing. And they sent over a couple of guys to talk to Dad. Dad called them up and said, I need a rule book. Can you guys help me? I know you guys have one. They said, yeah. And they sent over Jack Brady and John Christie. And so they came over, and I was driving home from high school or college back then, and they were all standing there, and they said, well, they had this little book in their hand, and they were trying to decide how to make a rule book for this new kind of racing. And so they said, well, first we need a name for this kind of racing. And they were going, well, let's call it dirt road racing. Oh, that's good. Well, let's call it fire road racing. Well, you might not be on fire roads. We can't use fire road racing.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept going, Dad, you can't use the word road. It was like I was tugging at his arm a little bit, and I felt they weren't listening to me because I was only a kid. You can't use the word road. It's not on the road, Dad. It's off the road. It's off of it. I was thinking it's off of the road.
Yeah.
And Dad looked at me and he goes, yeah, we'll call it off-road racing. And I just went, no, that sounds like offshore racing. and the next day I came up to the office, and he and his partner were sitting there, and Mike, the new name is NORRA. We just added off to the National Road Racing Association. Now it's the National Off-Road Racing Association. I said, okay, and it went along with it. It kind of grew on us, and that's where the word off-road was invented.
Wow.
That was before the first Mexican 1000.
Wow. That's incredible.
It's a pretty simple story. I mean, it's just